It's midterm week. Motivation is at an all-time low, but the pressure is at an all-time high. It's this kind of week in particular that reminds me of why loving what I do matters, but it also reminds me of why I struggled to decide to go to architecture school in the first place. Let me explain. You already know my path to architecture school was unconventional, but by 2020, it was the logical next step in my career. In my sculpture practice, I made public art and large-scale installations and found myself having more meaningful conversations with architects rather than artists. After a few exhibitions and installations, I applied to work on a grant where I spent 2 years collaborating with a university architecture program. This work, based in community engagement and site-specific designs, strengthened my work's connection to ideas that I had been chasing since undergrad but didn't have the language to describe it. During the program, I witnessed graduate students finish out their degrees. I watched students pull all-nighters and print 5 minutes before reviews. I realized the true pain of architecture is not just participating, but knowing that you are just kind of bad when you start. Fast forward to 2020, and the decision to go to architecture school was the elephant in the room. I had just received rejection letters for several projects and knew that I needed to level up. I was tired of giving my work the tagline between sculpture and architecture. I knew that it was time to discover what the architecture part truly meant. The university program showed me what school would be like on the other side of the acceptance letter. Before portfolios and applications, I grieved the studio practice I built. I said goodbye to 8 hours of sleep and accepted that my personal life would now be on pause. With the sadness came joy as I realized I now had the opportunity to focus on one thing for a set amount of time. I give you a snapshot into my application season because the past 3 years came crashing down on me during midterms. It's my final semester and my final midterms. Precedent research, site diagrams, site models, and master plans were never how I dreamed of expressing my thoughts, but here I am doing just that. Some of my classmates argue midterms are harder than finals, and finals in a lot of ways are just more concise midterm projects. This real estate development studio, however, was a totally different animal. To recap, we visited the Javits Center in New York and conducted precedent studies on monofunctional facilities around the world. In February, my class spent a week in Amsterdam looking at a variety of developments, spanning historic neighborhoods to new construction on the Eastern Docklands. Since my return from travel week, I've been in full-blown midterm preparation mode. Which brings us to where we are today, just 2 days before my midterm review. Today is Wednesday and my midterm review is on Friday, so I thought it would be fun to take you along to show you what it's really like to prepare for a midterm review at Yale School of Architecture. Goals for today include getting the master plan finished and an illustrator so my studio partner and I can focus on sections and vignettes. I take a quick coffee break and bunker down for what I know will be a very late night. My work is progressing really well. I switch over to working on our overall site axon, and everyone is in a good mood. Look at this perfect eBay listing my friend sent me. Despite the tension in the studio, we are really trying to enjoy our last semester together. My studio partner is now wrapping up the master plan in Illustrator, and I am productively working back and forth between our site axon, our section vignettes, and phasing diagrams. I was aiming to finish the phasing diagrams before I left for the night, however, that is when disaster struck. Around 11 p.m., it started storming bad outside. Many of us were in studio working, but also many of us were there waiting out the weather. Here is this super cute clip I took of us working around 1 a.m., and an hour later, before any of us knew what was happening, the fire alarm went off, and right before the alarm, all of our computers surged 3 times. I took this as a sign to go home, but not before snapping a photo of all of my dedicated classmates waiting for the all clear to return to their desks. So here I am back at my desk a few hours later. I was just greeted by my studio professors who had just arrived from Amsterdam, and I am back to working on the vignettes. I was fortunate to have not lost anything from the power surge, so I could just sit down, finish up the phasing diagrams, and begin on the next drawings. I decided to create small isometric sections made up of chunks of our site model. That way I could populate different floors and show adjacent program above and below the ground. The thing that makes review week feel real is when the monitors placed on every floor show the review schedule. The design is different every term, and I always look forward to what they come up with. So it's the night before review, and it's going to be a late one for me. So I take a quick walk to the Bass Library to renew some materials and head back to the 4th floor to wrap up the vignettes and make a pinup plan with my studio partner. Around 9 p.m., we meet to make final adjustments to our master plan and section diagrams. We also make sure that our phasing makes sense because we are proposing temporary pavilion spaces early on to make better use of the site's periphery while necessary updates happen internally. Echo and I also discuss our pinup format for the following morning and to make sure that we are meeting the must-haves on our list of deliverables that we've made for ourselves. After a few nights of no sleep, it's easy to get distracted and caught up in the details that no one will notice. Midterm is always about big picture and research. After a few more hours of work, I've moved on to finishing the overall site axon drawing, but had no idea how to scale it. So Echo and I pop up to the 6th floor, which is our review space, and measure the walls to make sure that we are exporting all of our drawings at the right scale. So here's our lovely axon drawing that I'm scaling to be a 24-inch by 24-inch print. As my studio partner wraps up our presentation, I send everything to the printer. When you push for a deadline like this, you do not go home until you print. I repeat, you do not leave the building until you've sent your final drawings to the printer. So here I am, the day of review. I'm looking somewhat rested, but I have a to-do list running through my head. The sun is shining, and my short walk to school helped me get my head in the game. It was time to make our pinup a reality. So I spent about 30 minutes cutting out our phasing diagram, which should have foreshadowed that it had too many phases. Spoiler alert for the review. But while this took a long time, I didn't have to worry about sending any other drawings to the printer. And while some of the drawings on paper are incomplete, we were able to finish them for the presentation. An important lesson I've learned over the years is that critics look at the screen more than they look at the wall. Case in point is that during my second year, my studio partner and I designed a full-fledged board game, and we couldn't get a single juror to play it. We had orchestrated several easy rounds just so they could understand the goals of the game, because then we were taking it to the site to play with community members. And so it doesn't matter if you have a drawing or a board game on the wall, they don't care. So what this means is that if you are pressed for time, it is 3 a.m. and you need to get home to get some sleep, and you still need to entourage a drawing, I always set a timer for 15 minutes and then just send it to the printer. There's always time to fix it for the presentation. So I didn't want you to watch me suffer as I pinned up our phasing diagram, but here is our wall with our urban plan, our master plan. I'm hanging up our isometric vignettes, as well as our convention center section and our overall axon drawing. And before I knew it, our critics and jurors arrived, and it was time to introduce the studio brief. My very brave classmate Cindy kicked off our review with her amazing master plan, taking advantage of the Burlog neighborhood. Echo and I were scheduled to present after lunch, so I bopped around to see my friends present their projects in other studios. And while my review is at lunch, I'll get to that later, The day is over as quickly as it started, and it's my favorite part, where everyone gathers around wine and cheese for a roundtable discussion to circle back to any highlights from the day. Afterward, we headed to a quick happy hour to say goodbye to my professors before their flight to Amsterdam.
Hello. So, yeah, okay. So, after this 10-minute video, I did not include the clip of our midterm feedback. I thought it would be best to end this with just more of a overall reflection, summary of our comments, and just a recap of the semester so far. Okay. So, that being said, this studio has been unlike anything that I have had thus far at the Yale School of Architecture. It is a very top down process. There is very little iteration and there is little to no process. Everything feels like a thinking experiment that then leads to grinding out big drawings the night before. Like, I look back on this footage and I cannot believe that I started our overall site axon at like 1 a.m. Like, that to me is crazy and not how I work. So the studio has had some hiccups, but not in terms of our teaching team or the brief. It just is about the learning curve. Like, I've never done anything related to housing so far. I also spent the last semester that advanced studio designing public space for the youth in the Bronx. And so this for me, like, the hiccups are just it's my own inability to not overthink and stress. So that being said, the the review did go well. Like, there were some things that I wish we had maybe explained a bit more, and there are also things that I wish we had talked about a bit less. And like I've already hinted about in the video earlier, the phasing was something that the critics really got hung up on, and it really stilted the conversation in terms of parts of the project that we can move forward with, parts that worked, parts that didn't. And so the phasing was just really the thing that they talked about not working. And that's because I think there was a little bit of naivety on my part and my studio partner's part. And what I mean by that is it was very just pie in the sky. As I said, I literally cut out like 18 drawings, and each of those drawings contained a different step of our phasing, which was divided into like 3 or 4 parts. And so it was too much to digest, and then it just opened us up to a lot of questions that we didn't have the answer for. Whereas the way to do that would have been to create a very simplified timeline of just saying, this happens then, this happens next, this happens third, and maybe this happens last. And versus we really just broke it down into almost every possible step we could think of, because we thought that made it more believable, but really that made it less believable. So, yeah, okay. So the phasing, and then towards the end of the conversation, we really got into more of what we were hoping of next steps and how to move forward. And so I think we're now considering this blend of creating a public facade and then connecting our mobility concept of ways to access the convention center with new kind of redesigned metro stations that really launch you into the site and situate you at the Rye. So I think we're really excited about that. The other thing is that the way that I believe we're going to move forward with our master plan now opens up this big void in the middle of our site. So we need to reevaluate how we're going to use that area for housing. So, all that being said, it's been a very complex semester. The logistics all have to work together in some big, like, orchestrated scheme that does that has to work together in a way that doesn't interrupt per the studio brief. The event calendar at the Rye cannot remove square footage, and it has to either replace it or add square footage or square meters to the Rye. And so it's just been a really challenging concept to get everything to work together, but it's also been incredibly fun. Like, this is a real project. These changes will happen to the Rye. And so it's just really amazing to think that we have the opportunity to think about these problems that real practitioners are currently struggling with. And it's just really fun. I love large scale infrastructure. I love logistics. I love all of these things. And I guess for me, it's just really, I want to get the big scale stuff working so then I can focus on the small scale. But I know that I need to kind of get down to these nitty gritty details of designing the storefronts, of designing the housing and their floor plans and things like that. So then the whole master plan can kind of come to life. So I don't know. It's just like a balance of what you're interested in and like getting the project done. And doing what's fun. So you have these little, what I say, like treats at the end. And I get really excited about just imagining these futures and these lives within my drawings. And I know that like I have to make these big moves in order to make those small scenes and vignettes come to life. And so, yeah, okay. So, midterms, 2 weeks of spring break is up next. And then it is kind of like a rush to finish all of your other electives. And then it'll be finals all over again. So, I know there's going to be a lot of changes happening in the next few weeks, but I'm really looking forward to the end of the semester. So, that being said, I don't think I've given myself a formal introduction so far in this video, but my name is Miranda. I am a third year graduate student at the Yale School of Architecture, and I am making these videos to tell my story, to show a really transparent day to day life in architecture school, especially for those that come from a non conventional, non background education. And so I really hope that these videos can either help you make the decision to go to architecture and then help you get through it. So, yeah, okay. Thanks for tuning in, and I can't wait to share the next video with you. Bye.